Nerdwriter is the worst out of all of the video essay channels. He just likes to add fancy words so he sounds smart and doesn't get his point across. Nerdwriter1 actually infuriates me. He takes pseudo-intellectualism to the absolute extremes. My flatmate and I watch his videos to train ourselves in identifying, for lack of a better term, complete bullshit. God, I hate Nerdwriter. That cheap, pretentious, obnoxious, pseudo-intellectual dollar store every frame a painting wannabe is so far up his ass he probably masturbates to the sound of his annoying voice. Holy shit. Nerdwriter1, also known as Evan Pushchak, has been an essayist for over 7 years, ever since the first rise of the video essay as a YouTube medium. And both he and Every Frame a Painting tend to be the first two names on the forefront when discussing this rise. To a large extent, Nerdwriter's kind of a founding father of the video essay. So why do so many people hate him? And is the hate justified? Is Nerdwriter1 a bad essayist? This fellow seems to think he is. So let's test this claim. When we look at a Nerdwriter video, what does he say?
There's a 3-minute and 20-ish second long scene in the middle of the animated sci-fi action thriller Ghost in the Shell that doesn't really qualify as sci-fi, action, or thriller.
Nerdwriter begins his Ghost in the Shell video by talking about this weird 3-minute scene in the middle of it. He then moves from this weird scene to comics and the aspect-to-aspect transitions that are sometimes used within them, and how these transitions take us through different spaces. Then to the world of Ghost in the Shell and some of the themes within it, eventually noting how people's minds in this world can be hacked, which brings identity into question. And now, 3.5 minutes in, we get the driving question.
So how can a meditation on space illuminate the problem and theme of identity in Ghost in the Shell?
In this first 3.5 minutes, Nerdwriter's woven several key pieces together, all in preparation for this question. The premise, the concept of space, of identity, and then finally the driving question, which centers around these two concepts. And he does this while using a technique that I'd like to call bouncing. Take, for example, Every Frame a Painting's video on F for fake.
F for fake.
F for fake.
F for fake.
He begins the video by, of course, talking about F for fake, but 50 seconds in, he bounces to something else.
We've found out this really simple rule that maybe you guys have all heard before, but it took us a long time to learn it.
And yes, he needs this clip to present his concept, but think about its effect on the audience. There are 2 basic steps. Step 1, curiosity. Why is this clip in a video about F for fake? Then, step 2, connection.
What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word therefore or but.
It's about the structure used in F for fake. Because I have a theory that viewer interest is created through balancing these 2 things. If we skip the curiosity, we have boring exposition.
My name is Julie. My mother's name was Susan. She was killed in a car accident with my father and they're both dead. So stop trying to bring them back.
But if the connections are too hard to make, the audience gets confused and frustrated. And when we look at Nerdwriter's Ghost in the Shell video, this bouncing is everywhere. This is why 5 minutes into the video, you're smack in the middle of a history of Hong Kong. Even if you don't like Nerdwriter, I think, at least for this video, there's a clear structure and momentum to it that should at least garner a little bit of respect. But at the same time, we haven't gotten to the point yet.
Yes, spaces are made by humanity, but humanity is made by its spaces, too. It's a feedback loop, a cycle made virtuous or vicious based on the choices we make together. Ghost in the Shell wants to show us that the dynamics of ourselves and our spaces are one and the same.
Wait, what? That's my main problem with a lot of these video essays. They bring up a lot of interesting issues, but so many of them fail to synthesize any of the points they raise into any kind of satisfying conclusion, instead choosing to end on a grand sweeping statement which doesn't really mean anything at all. This is absolutely valid criticism. Kind of. Because I can't guarantee that Nerdwriter's conclusion is meaningless just because I can't understand it. But because I can't understand it, it is bad writing. Because the audience can't make that connection, and that's really frustrating 7 minutes into a video. But while this criticism is valid, it's part of a larger comment that has some confusing connotations when you actually think about it. Nerdwriter1 actually infuriates me. He takes pseudo-intellectualism to the absolute extremes. My flatmate and I watch his videos to train ourselves in identifying, for lack of a better term, complete bullshit. Damn. Right off the bat, it's pretty clear this guy thinks Nerdwriter's videos are total garbage. But in paragraph 2, we have an immediate tonal shift. We've got a neutral statement, one praising Nerdwriter, and one criticizing him. So together, the paragraph has a neutral vibe, 50-50, some good, some bad, which seems odd in comparison with the very strongly worded paragraph 1. But in paragraph 3, he clarifies by presenting a specific example of what he means in paragraph 2. Visually, this new paragraph seems neutral again, or maybe leaning negative. But if you've actually seen this video, his praise is about 90% of it, and his criticism is only about the last line. This is the commenter's best example of how Nerdwriter is garbage. That 90% of it is great, and a tiny bit is terrible. At face value, this feels really weird in comparison with a paragraph that made it seem like everything was garbage. But to be fair, he has a mathematical out. Because these portions of the video might have different weights. If the conclusion of an essay is the most important thing, or even the only important thing, then his frustration makes sense. When he gets invested in a video and then the conclusion doesn't really say anything, he feels cheated. But this is only if the conclusion is more important than everything else. But what if it's not? What if the destination is less important than the journey?
Hi everyone, this is Evan Pushak, and it's my first video blog.
As many of you may know, Evan Pushak began his channel as a vlogger, but is now a video essayist. But what you may not know is that Evan didn't change from vlogs to video essays. His vlogs are video essays.
T.S. Eliot said, "What happens when a work of art is created is something that happens simultaneously to all the works which preceded it."
And as his vlogs go on, you can see them evolve toward the style he has today. Starting as early as vlog 3, you can already start to see traces of classic video essay form, but his cadence is still more that of an upbeat vlog.
Right, so the traditions of the mainstream art forms, painting, literature, music, filmmaking, sculpture, dance, theater, poetry, and I would even say...
By vlog 26, if you cut out the upbeat vloggy intro,
Coffee on a Tuesday in vlog 26. I'm back, baby!
It sounds and looks just like all of the video essays that have long lost the vlog title.
In the spring of 1818, the poet John Keats wrote a letter to his friend John Hamilton Reynolds, which contained in it a poetic metaphor for how he saw human life.
Which, by the way, happens at what would be vlog 60. 59 is the last one to have vlog in the title. Many of his vlogs after this will retain the vlog facecam, but of a style less like that of a vlog and more like that of Vsauce, until eventually he stops using the facecam altogether, except for the occasional outro.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching, and welcome to everybody who came in.
I think once you start thinking of these video essays as vlogs, a lot of the criticism becomes a lot more understandable. Maybe he has weak, meaningless conclusions because these videos were never about making an argument. Rather, they're about giving Evan a way to share his explorations through art. Because that's what these vlogs are. Evan explores an area of art that interests him, and then he shares that exploration with his audience. He's not a professor here to teach you, he's just a fan, having fun and sharing it with you. And I think this is important to understand, because while some of the criticism against him is very valid, it feels like so much of it doesn't fully understand what these videos are or what he's actually saying. Take, for example, his video titled, "Why Are There So Few Smartphones in Popular Movies?" Somebody posted this video to our video essay, and it immediately garnered a negative reception. Holy shit, I don't think Nerdwriter has ever made such a boring video. But let's take a closer look at the criticism. This comment here is self-admittedly nitpicking. I know this wasn't the point of the video, but that statement really annoyed me. And then we've got this guy. I cringed when he explained why there are no smartphones in Star Wars. This guy's claim is that the world of Star Wars is so absurd that obviously there are no smartphones, and it's cringe to explain it.
And finally, in Solo, there are no smartphones at all because this is a far future galaxy that's set in the past that has what George Lucas thought future things would look like 40 years ago.
But this isn't an explanation. This is a joke.
And finally, in Solo, there are no smartphones at all because this is a far future galaxy that's set in the past that has what George Lucas thought future things would look like 40 years ago.
The joke being that obviously there are no smartphones in Star Wars because the world's so absurd. You don't have to think it's funny, but it's kinda cringe to think it's cringe. And of course, we've got this fellow. This was an awful essay. Like, truly awful. Could it not be something as simple as that anything past a basic telephone conversation is very difficult to get visually correct without coming off as basic and silly? I mean, yeah, it could be. But just because something is intuitive doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And Nerdwriter wants to answer this question. Is the lack of smartphones in popular movies indicative of a resentment of how these smartphones control our lives? Personally, I don't think so. And if you want to call this essay bad because you disagree, I guess you can, but when you write an essay in school, you don't get a grade based on whether or not your teacher agrees with you. You get a grade based on how well you supported your argument. So how well does Nerdwriter support his argument? Honestly, kinda meh. So, if you want to call this video awful, maybe. But truly awful? That's a bit of a stretch. And this is what's so interesting about so much of this criticism against him. Why is so much of the criticism so vitriolic and angry? God, I hate Nerdwriter. That cheap, pretentious, obnoxious, pseudo-intellectual dollar store every frame a painting wannabe is so far up his ass he probably masturbates to the sound of his annoying voice. This content is free, so why feel so strongly about it? Nerdwriter is the worst out of all of the video essay channels. He just likes to add fancy words so he sounds smart and doesn't get his point across. This comment right here is the key. But first, let's remove this, take out this part, and now we've got some good-ass criticism.
But as Notre Dame makes clear, the Gothic period was the final page in this important epoch of architecture. In printed books, ideas found an even more durable capsule for transmission into posterity. In this way, he says, architecture developed concomitantly with human thought.
Why is Nerdwriter using concomitantly when he could just say simultaneously? He uses such large vocab and so many metaphors and goes point to point so fast, so often that it is incredibly difficult to fully grasp what he's actually saying. Interestingly, the medium of the video essay is actually working against him. Because if this were a normal essay where the reader controls the tempo, they can always read more slowly at difficult sections or reread quickly to make sure they understand. But you can't do this in a video. You can rewind, but that breaks the rhythm, and you still can't control the tempo. Now, I hate word shaming. I hate shaming people for having a large vocabulary, and on the other hand, I hate grammar Nazis or people like Shapiro who will claim that rap music is bad because it doesn't have perfect formal grammar, which is a gross misunderstanding of how language functions or what its purpose is. But at the same time, it is important to realize how your grammar or vocab will affect your audience, and if it gets to the point that no one knows what you're saying, that's a problem. Nerdwriter is saying something. It's just hard to know what. And all his video essays says nothing, or doesn't tend to say anything. He is just starting a point and making people feel the feeling of analysis, for views. He presents his essays, like he is a know-it-all, always right POV person. He makes people feel what feels right and wrong. I may be wrong, but there is something definitely that makes me feel he is a pretentious on being good. I hate Nerdwriter. Reading this does make me feel for this person, and I think this happens to a lot of viewers. They get lost and can't track what he's saying, and in their mind, there are only two possibilities. Option 1, the video has meaning, but they can't understand it. Therefore, they are stupid. Of course, they can't stand the idea of being stupid, I mean, who can? So instead, they grasp onto option 2. There is no meaning. The Nerdwriter is saying nothing and is just using fancy words to trick you. And where does the Nerdwriter fall on here? Well, obviously, he thinks there is meaning in his videos, which means he must think the viewer is stupid. I know this is conjecture, but to me, this makes sense. I think this explains why so many viewers don't just dislike Nerdwriter, they literally despise and hate him. Because if Nerdwriter isn't bad, then they must be stupid. Because they don't realize that there's a third option. The video has meaning, but the viewer can't understand it because Nerdwriter's written it badly. As far as the hate and criticism is concerned, I think the majority of it is either entirely wrong or misunderstands what he's actually saying. And all of it is layered with far too much anger and indignance, considering this is content that's provided for free. But there are some valid points. Nerdwriter's ending lines can feel weak and maybe meaningless. And he does have a problem with using wordy language and going too fast point to point that it can be very difficult to track what he's saying. But at the same time, when you actually look into his videos, there is absolutely a structure to it that's actually pretty well written, along with techniques that help keep viewer interest. And there are things that I didn't talk about. His clean editing, his quality presentation, and how there's value in how a video essay makes you feel. And he puts a lot of work and research into his videos, for which I think he should get a little respect for. On top of all of this, regardless of how you feel about his content, all of his works should be put into perspective of what they really are. Vlogs. A way for Nerdwriter to explore art and share what he wants to say with us, whether you agree with him or not. So at the end of the day, the answer to our question is ultimately a subjective one. Is Nerdwriter1 a bad essayist? Well, I guess that's up to you.
I said at the beginning that essays are sort of like a train of thought. Well, I kind of think that writing is thought. I believe for a long time that we learn by saying. So when you're watching a video that I make, what you're really watching is me learning. That's what you're watching right now as I give this talk at Lafayette College. And I encourage everybody to try that out for themselves. Because only by articulating in words, in video, or in both do we really find our point of view. Thank you very much.